Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And joining me today is designer Nicolas Fournier, who has the upcoming game Megapulse coming to Kickstarter right around the corner. The owner of Orion Games, welcome to the show.
Hey Jack, thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you. And you're just coming off the tail of going to a bunch of conventions and stuff. You were at Gen Con, weren't you?
Yeah, so I was at Gen Con and I'm going in Germany to Essen in 2 weeks.
So
Big
you're
convention.
in Canada right now, and then you come to the U.S. to go to Gen Con, and now you're going to Germany for Essen, and it is 2021. What is that experience like? I mean, international traveling while we're in this global pandemic is crazy enough on its own, and now you're showing off games to people. Tell me about your experience at Gen Con.
Yeah, so going to Gen Con was quite easy. So I had a COVID test before I went there. Coming back was quite harder. You need a specific kind of test to go back to Canada. It costs a lot of money, and it needs to be like in a specific times before returning.
Right.
And you have to like fill in all this kind of paperwork to return. But like going back home to Canada is easier than like going just to visit.
Okay.
So hopefully everything went well. And I think it's going to be basically the same for Germany. But Gen Con was really good, really awesome. It was my first big con like that. So many people, and they only had like 50%, 50% capacity, and it was still like people everywhere. So it was crazy.
So you were just showing off Megapulse to people. Were you still doing any sort of development, or were you really just promoting the upcoming Kickstarter?
Yeah, the development is pretty over now, so we were just promoting, just showing up the game. So many people asked us to buy a copy, and we were just like, oh, we don't have anything to sell. We're just like hyping people up for the Kickstarter. But we did got a bunch of cool feedback that are really interesting, more towards the components of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, we had the cards being laminated for the convention so that they won't break as easily. And people really love the plastic feel of the cards. They said like it feels like sturdy and futuristic as well, having these plastic cards at your hand. So this gave us the idea to maybe have that as a stretch goal maybe on the Kickstarter. So a bunch of great feedback, a bunch of great people. I think we've met like over 1,500 people on that weekend. So it was crazy.
Well, Orion Games is their debut. Your debut is this release. So, like, what is getting space at Gen Con? You know, are you in an unpub room, or are you like actually there with a booth? Is it harder to jockey for space, you know, amongst all these established companies as this new guy saying, "Hey, look at my game. It's like F-Zero meets, I don't know, Flamme Rouge."
Yeah, so you could, if you want to, just pay less to go into the prototype section of Gen Con. We actually paid for a full booth, so we were there amongst the other exhibitors in the main exhibitor hall. We had a small space, just one table, showing off the game, doing some demos. So people really liked the feeling of our booth. Like, it was small, it was only one table playing a game, but it felt genuine. Like, we were not there to like push a product on you and buy stuff. And so many of these booths were just about selling products that there were not a lot just where you could sit down and play.
Sure.
So people found that really fun to just sit down, relax a bit, play a game, and like not feel bad for not buying anything afterwards, right? You just have to say, oh yeah, I'll back the Kickstarter, and then we won't annoy you anymore. So yeah, I think we had a great relation with people there. Like, people love to talk with us. Everyone was so friendly.
So what's your carnival barker pitch for this game? Like, when someone's walking by and you just have one table and you're like, hey, you want to come over and play Megapulse? And someone's like, what's Megapulse? Like, what you have such a narrow window in order to catch their attention. So like, what is it that you tell them in order to get them into a seat?
Yeah, so we have a 1 minute pitch and a 5 minute pitch because we always ask permission for people. So we're like, hey, do you give me 1 minute of your time to like give you the quick recap? And if they say yes, then we go all in. If they don't, because we can kind of see in their eyes like if they're interested to know more about it. So sometimes we'll just see if they're like looking at the track, like kind of feeling the vibe, and we just approach them. Most of the time, like we know when it's time to talk. So basically, the basic elevator pitch is a futuristic racing game inspired by Wipeout, F-Zero, and Mario Kart.
Okay.
So we have way more action and dynamism than other racing games. So you can shoot people, throw bombs, you can drift through curves, charge nitro. There's a bunch of upgrades that you can get to do some hand building. So some racing games, you roll a die to move, and that's basically it. In this game, it's a card. There's a lot of card play. So you can have your hand of cards, which is all the different actions, and you can upgrade your hand by losing some cards, gaining some cards during the race, and you have that hand building mechanic there. Then there's simultaneous action selection. So everyone chooses 2 cards face down and then reveal before we each take our turns. So there's a lot of action planning, trying to figure out like what people will do, how to react to it. And you have a way to change a turn order in the same turn before anyone plays. So you can become first player, collide with people, play some bombs, and then surprise people. So there's that. There's also a modular track, so you can create your own track. There's 32 track tiles, and you only need like 12 or 14 to create a track. So there's a bunch of variety you can do. You can split the track in 2, join it back together. And yeah, I think like I'm a bit rusty because it's been like 2 weeks, and I'm the guy doing the demos. I had Devin there with me. Devin is a friend designer I met on Facebook, and it was the first time we met in real life. And he was then there with me at Gen Con, and he was the guy at the booth talking to people while I was doing the demos, right? So it would be better for the pitch than me.
Yeah, well, Devin was actually the guy who kind of like carnival barked me. Like he was hunting down appointments, and he was like, hey Jack, I met a guy and he told me about this podcast, and also like I know this other guy, and there's this bonkers wild racing game that he's making, and I thought like, yo, this would be a perfect connection to make. And so like he was rallying me as if I were a passerby at Gen Con. I just happened to be in Alaska while you're on the other side of the continent. So yeah. With this game, you mentioned some of the inspirations for it being video games, and this is one of the biggest challenges to me out of making adaptations of video games in a tabletop space, is that especially games like, or I guess genres that are like real-time strategy or racing games, part of the exhilaration and the enjoyment out of it is the instantaneous feedback, the need to carry momentum forward, and that you don't have the time to really think about things, which is kind of antithetical to the typical board game experience unless you're doing a real-time game, which is a whole different bag of beans. So like, how do you make sure that you're keeping players adrenaline up and capturing that spirit of the games that you're drawing inspiration from, but making it make sense within a tabletop context?
That's a good question. We have a few mechanics that help us like give the feeling of a racing video game and keep the adrenaline up. So first of them is the simultaneous action selection. So because we're making a plan in our head and placing these cards face down in front of us and then revealing them, we kind of have the feeling in a racing video game where you aim for the next curve, try to predict what people will do and how to take that curve. And then you kind of give up some control because everything's going so fast. And in Megapulse, because you need to select your actions before you take your turns, you kind of have that feeling of making a plan in your head and trying to make it work. And since we have everything in Megapulse is about interaction. So we took inspiration from Mario Kart, for example. So there's a bunch of ways to interact with people, and you're encouraged to bump into each other. So if I collide with you, I deal damage to you, and I push you around, but I don't take any damage myself. So people want to crash into each other. And if I crash with you during my turn, then that slightly changes your turn, because now you cannot take the same path you intended to. You'll want to like change a bit how you're going to play your turn. So that feeling of always being involved in the game, because other players' turn will directly impact how you play your turn, and having all these cinematic moments of crashing people into walls, taking these boosts on the track, it feels in your head as if you're actually racing, as if you're taking those actions. And we made the mechanics as crunchy, as feel good as possible. So you go fast, you go crazy. The bombs have a huge radius of damage. You can kind of feel in your head these moments, these memories from your childhood from playing those games, those video games, and they all come back to you.
What about rubber banding?
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest issues that, you know, is a make or break thing for a lot of people playing, say, Mario Kart, is, you know, you have the situation where you want a skilled player to be able to do better, but then you also want the less skilled players to still stand some sort of chance and be competitive. And like, how do you balance that so that it's satisfying in the least? Because any bit too much in either direction is just going to make it a disaster.
Yeah, so that was one challenge we had during development, and so we have a few things that help with that. Everything in Megapulse is designed so that it's harder to keep going and keep gaining, making distance between you and the other players as first player, then it is easy to catch up. So it's always easier to catch up than to keep going forward as leading player. So first of all, we have like damaging players. You have a card to shoot people. If you shoot other players in front of you, it's direct hits. You just deal damage to them because they're in range, right? But if you want to attack players behind you, you have to place a bomb, and you're trying to aim that bomb so that it will like explode to like and hinder other players' movement. But it's not guaranteed for you to deal damage. Then then all the other stuff about the collision system, right? In other racing games, they try to prevent players from colliding with each other by having the leading player of the race be the first player. So at the end of each round in other racing games, you change a turn order so that the first player is the leading racer. That way there's not that much collisions. In Megapulse, the turn order changes by the player's action. There's a card in your hand that changes turn order, and as long as no one plays that card, the turn order stays the same. So if you're first player and you're behind other players, then you can, on your turn, crash into them. So as the leading racer of the race, everyone who plays before you crashes into you. So you take a bunch of damage. So it's a better position to be in the last position because you don't get people crashing into you as they move forward. And finally, we have our catch-up mechanic, which is the catalyst. So you have a pilot tile that you can choose, which has a special ability that becomes stronger as you become behind. So that this special ability is available to you anytime. So let's say if I'm close to you and I'm the trickster, I have a grappling hook, and I can grapple onto you and move as you move. I move with you, right? But if I'm 5 zones behind you, then I don't have to pay the cost for that card anymore, and gets a bit stronger. So this helps me catch up quite a bit, because if I'm really far behind, then it's going to be really more powerful. So in that sense, it's really hard to really get more than 5 spaces behind the first player. You have that rubber band effect that helps you stay in that zone. But from there, you still have to play your cards right. You still have to earn that victory if you want to become the next first player. Because it's hard. It's easy to catch up, but hard to actually pass the first player.
And does it feel consistent from player count to player count? Because like it seems like something where at a lower player count it may still be good, but it's like a different feeling type of game as opposed to like a higher player count where there's much more collisions. There's many more opportunities for overcoming or just being completely wrecked. Like again, bringing it back to Mario Kart, that feeling of being in first place and suddenly it's like blue shell, red shell, banana peel launching up ahead, and you're just like, what is going on?
Yeah, definitely. So the game plays from 2 to 4 players, and at each player count, the feeling of it, the vibe is slightly different, but it's still really, really fun. So at 4 players, that's where you're going to have the most chaos. So players will place bombs, there's going to be collisions, it's going to be insane. So will be feeling like Mario Kart, basically. At 3 players, there's a bit less chaos because people will naturally collide less with each other. So then you have less players being low health and then less like incentivization for finishing off players. Sorry, I'm French Canadian, and that word is killing me every time.
It kills me every time, and I speak English.
So at 3 players, it's more about the skills. It's more about who plays the best combos with their cards. And then at 2 players, we actually have our modular track system that you can just flip the tiles on the other side, and the track becomes a bit narrower, more narrow, right? So that it's harder to take the curves, it's harder to stay in the right track. So it becomes more tense because players will try their best to not die off the walls. So it feels like a duel of like who's going to be managing the health best to pass the finish line without dying. So all player counts are great, but they just feel like a different tension and experience.
Nicolas, it ain't cheap to travel internationally to not just one convention in one country, but then to go to another convention and to have table space. You have this upcoming Kickstarter. This is the first project for your company. Are you all in at this point? Like, are you dedicating to this as your full-time job right now? Or is this like the typical board game trajectory for someone where it's like, well, this is what I'm doing in my spare time and I have this other career, but if this were to turn out, then of course I'd love to make this my full-time gig.
Yeah, so I have a full-time job, and I'm a game designer for a small studio here in Montreal. So this is in my spare time, but I actually like invest more time in this than my day job because I'm working. Like, I watched the interview with Dave Beck, and he was talking how for Distill they work like day and night on that.
Right.
It's basically the same here, right? So we're doing some all-nighters all the time, trying to like rush the game. So I've invested a lot of personal money, a lot of time. I can't wait for this to be over to have some time with my girlfriend, with my friends, with my family, like actually see some people. So it's a full-on investment of everything I have on my personal side, and I have some interesting opportunities for what it will become after Megapulse, because I've got a lot of people talking with me about like partnership, starting something with them, or merging this, or like selling Orion Games to another publisher. So there's many opportunities. I might continue it myself. I might merge it with something. But Megapulse was just a passion project, something I wanted to do for myself to learn how to do the whole process as a kind of a way to create something of my own that I like before moving on to having a job, a boss and something for my other project, right?
I know of quite a few French Canadian video game development studios. What's the tabletop game scene like there?
It's rising pretty fast. So I'd say in Quebec especially, we have more and more distributors, more and more publishers, and the board game cafes, board game pubs are booming. There's so many of them. So people are starting to realize that there's more to board games than Monopoly. It's developing fast. I don't know, like comparatively to the US or other countries, how fast it is, but like it seems like everyone's everyone wants to go into that industry. So we have all these small publishers, just like me, like doing one board game alone, and then people start to do some B2B, and like groups start to form. So we have bigger publishers. We have Scorpion Masqué here, which are doing pretty good, and also a lot of distributors like Synapse Games, Plan B that did. What's the name? I did their new games is Equinox, but before that they did Road of Spices, the Golem edition.
Oh yeah,
stuff.
yeah. They did the Century Spice Road and Century Golem edition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I wouldn't say it's as big as in the US or in Europe, but it's certainly growing fast.
Well, let's talk about like the differences between your anticipation of going into Gen Con versus going to Essen, because those are different stages of you bringing this game to life. So like, was there a strategic consideration in like what your main focus and like the main audience that you wanted to present this to, and how you wanted to show off the game in one convention versus the other?
So basically, we decided last minute to go there.
Okay, that's a good way to decide anything.
So we were like, "Hey, Essen is coming. Should we go there?" I was talking to my girlfriend, and we said, "Let's do it.
Let's do it."
So we decided to go to Essen first, just because it's the biggest one. It's a trip. It's like an adventure. Like we won't regret going there, just because it's a whole experience to go there once in a lifetime, you know. But then we saw Origins, PAX Unplugged, Gen Con, and we're like, hey, that would be fun too. So budget wise, that may not have been the best decision, but I regret nothing. So we chose to go to Gen Con just because it was the biggest one in North America, and we had a ton of fun, and I think it was a great preparation for Essen, because we had a lot of English speaking people, and I had Devin with me, whose first language is English, so he could help me a lot. And because of the 50% attendance, I think it was like the best conditions for me to like experience a big convention. We had a bunch of things going wrong, like my plane was delayed. We had like a hotel room cancellation at the last minute. They changed this room for like a smaller one, and we made some errors in the parking department of going to Gen Con. But like that was always like small mistakes that will like help me have a safer, more like peace of mind when I go to Germany for Essen, because it's another country, and I know like people mostly talk English at Essen, but there's a bunch of German speaking folks. So I had Andreas Wild work on German flyers of the game, so that even if I don't speak German myself, I can distribute those flyers to German people so that they can read and learn about the game and get hyped. But that way.
I know you talked earlier about the considerations, or at least the safety precautions of getting tested, coming to the country, and getting the tests and returning, and it being a much more I guess elaborate test and returning to Canada. Was there any part of this where you were considering maybe this just isn't the time, like the collective need to, as people, as human beings? Was there ever a moment where you were considering, I'm contributing to maybe the problem of just going to conventions, traveling internationally? I mean, it's one thing for someone who's actually doing this as a matter of business, which you are doing, but it's another thing to, have this drive to go to conventions as an attendee, and you're creating more of that drive. You're incentivizing people to take part in something that is, for the most part, a luxury, at least to the attendee, the consumer, that sort of thing. I'm not trying to vilify you or rake you over the coals here, but I do want to know, like, what were some of the thoughts that you had regarding that when you were thinking about going to these conventions?
So I read all they send you a document when you are exhibitor for these conventions about like all the safety protocols to follow for the COVID safety, and all of it, especially for Essen, is pretty rigorous. Everyone in the convention needs to be fully vaccinated, have a test in the days before, wear a mask at all times, and sanitize their hand at every station of board games. And there's like the social distancing limitations, all kinds of tools put in place to help that. Um, and I myself am fully vaccinated. I got all the the stuff sorted out. So like I know there is some kind of there was pictures of Gen Con being shared online about like
Yeah, for sure.
how insane is it?
And that was pretty divisive in the community. Like,
Yeah,
I
it
think
was.
there was like Twitter wars going on, and I
Mm-hmm.
was just kind of in the background, like, I just hope people are safe. Like, whatever you choose to do, I hope you're choosing to do what you do safely. But it really did feel like it was divisive within the social media aspect of the tabletop gaming hobby, where people were like, I'm going to block anyone who said that they went to Gen Con, and like it was back and forth. It was drama. It was drama for sure.
And you had to be there because the picture that was sent around was in the waiting area for attendees, and they could have done a better job. It's true to like organize people waiting, but inside of the convention hall, there was strict rules, and you had to there was like ample room for people to walk around while exerting social distancing. We were ourselves always wearing masks. Providing hand sanitizer to everyone and asking them to use it. So I think we did our part in like trying to make it a safer space for people. And like it wasn't that bad inside. Like the outside on the first day, yeah, it was kind of a mess.
Yeah.
But that was like the picture. Like if you would expand that picture, that there was no one else around. Like it was just the picture zoomed in on the like massive crowd of people. For Essen, I'm hoping it will be better handled. And as like my own responsibility in this, I'm trying to take as many precautions as I can and trying to be as responsible as I can. But the fact is, being a first-time creator and having Megapulse being like a racing game, which is hard to sell for some people, like it's not for everyone, right? I like going to Essen, going to Gen Con is kind of safety measure for us to make sure that like the Kickstarter at least works out, because we've put so much money and effort into this, like all our soul, and that like we want to put the best chances on our side. So yeah, maybe we should not have gone.
Well, let's take it back to happier, more positive things. Let's take it back to game design itself. Because you're right. This is a niche genre within tabletop games. Not everyone's going to like racing games. It's something that's visceral and cinematic, and you want to get that in front of people. So again, like I was saying, the desire to go to conventions, you have a meaningful business aspect to like why you would want to go to these conventions. Like it is going to make or break it for you, as opposed to like Leader Games. They could just release a game and it's going to sell a bajillion copies because Cole Worley was involved and Kyle Farron did the artwork, right? Like you need to get that in front of people, and not just because you're a first-time creator, but also because of the type of game that it is. So I want to know, like, you clearly have thought a lot about how to solve some of these issues that are inherent to this genre, or what might be like challenges for people to wrestle with as they're playing this. What was the most challenging thing to overcome as you were designing and developing this game? Like, was there a particular hard nut to crack where you needed to like really beat your head against the wall to make it satisfying, or did it just kind of come together fluidly?
So most of it came together quite fluidly, because we didn't center we didn't start designing the game around a theme or a mechanic. we started making it around a moment. So we were thinking about that moment when handling a curve in the game, and you move dangerously closer and closer to the outer edge because you lose traction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that excitement of not going slower in that moment, but going faster, but having this effect that helps you move sideways instead. So instead of slowing down, you just go faster, and at some point in the curve you go sideways to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we call the side thrust. That's one of your cards in your hand that allows you to do that. And the game is centered around handling those curves. And from that point we build a game around that. So it was fairly easy. I think we found a way pretty early on to develop that feeling of the game. And then the hardest part was to find who to market this game to. So we were like, it's a racing game, but I don't personally enjoy a racing game. I'm not a car guy. So like NASCAR, all that stuff, I'm not really into that.
Mm-hmm.
But so I was like, who would enjoy a racing game if even I don't enjoy racing games, but I do enjoy Megapulse? So we found out that, like, yeah, no one really like enjoys racing game like in the mainstream of like board games, but then everyone loves Mario Kart. Like everyone plays it as a kid. And what's about Mario Kart that we like is the interaction between players.
Mm-hmm.
So we added that, and that came to us fairly easy after that first struggle of finding out like who was the game for. So Wipeout players, F-Zero players, Mario Kart players, we made the game for them. So, and mechanic-wise, the biggest challenge was handling the death, like the destruction of your hover car. So what happens if you lose your last health point? So initially it was really punishing. Like you had to lose your whole turn just to repair, and then because you're at 0 speed, you had to spend the next few turns to just gather up speed again. It was quite punishing. We flipped it around. Instead of punishing players for dying, we actually chose to reward players for killing other players.
Yeah, there you go. That's a great inversion there.
So if I deal damage to you, when you die, I'm going to get a bunch of frenzy tokens that help me move forward even more. So that way it feels good because you get rewarded for killing the player. Because in the earlier version, even if I killed you, I should be happy, but I just feel guilt because like I just made you have a bad time playing the game, and it's supposed to be fun, right? So I'm like, I will not kill you just because I don't want you to be mad at me. But then with that new system, then I actively gain a reward, so I have a reason to kill you. And when you die, you're not crying over your miserable fate. You have just a small inconvenience in front of you, and you can just keep going, and it's not that bad, right? So that took a lot of time to refine, because once we knew we wanted to reward players for doing that, actually finding a system that works, that is not fiddly, that is intuitive, took a lot of iteration. And actually just 2 weeks before Gen Con was the moment we had our last like stroke of genius of how to handle that system, and it worked wonders at Gen Con. So that was really the biggest pain for us was to design that mechanic, and we learned a lot while doing so.
Well, that's awesome. Well, the Kickstarter is coming up here on October 26th, and I'm certainly looking forward to it. I love racing games. I love Mario Kart, and it seems to have this kinetic energy to it that kind of reminds me of like Adrenaline, another fantastic adaptation of a very different type of video game genre, but still emphasizing the benefit to attacking other players rather than the detraction from your own strategy as you get attacked by other players. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm excited to hear how the next convention goes for you, and I am so excited to hear how you do for the Kickstarter itself. Nicolas, thank you for coming onto the show. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure.
If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.